After the success of Jimmy Neutron at Nickelodeon, creator John A. Davis was branching out and looking for a new project. Luckily, Tom Hanks called. John A. Davis, director, Ant Bully.
After Neutron hit, I'd get, I was approached by a lot of folks, getting a lot of calls. And to be honest, there's a lot of projects that were offered that all we had to do is say yes, and we're going. But not all these projects I was not personally interested in. There were projects where, this would be great for my company to keep people working, but they wanted to attach me as the director. It was contingent upon that. And some of these projects were things like, oh gosh, that's just, I'm not into that, so I can't direct it well, and I'm not going to do a good job if I'm not connecting with it. So it would be good for the company, but bad for me. And then vice versa. Things would be projects that would be good for me, like, oh, I'd love to do that. Oh, but it's already set up at ILM, and it's got to be done there. It's like, well, I can't abandon my company. I've got to do it here. So trying to find the right project, it took a couple of years, but then I got a call from Tom Hanks, just out of the blue. He cold called me, and I remember the receptionist saying, "Hey, John, I got Tom Hanks on the phone for you." I was like, "Oh, okay, well, send him through." And so, Tom said, "Hey, I love Jimmy Neutron. I really love what you did. I've got the rights to this book called The Ant Bully. I've loved this book. I read it to my son all the time, and I'd love to talk to you and see if you had any ideas about turning it into a feature." And I said, "Sure, send it along." And so he sent the book. But my first thought was like, ants. There's been 2 other ant movies. There was, Bug's Life, and then there was PDI's Ants. And like, oh gosh, can anything but ants. And I kept thinking like, well, what could I do? But based on the nature of the story and the message of the story, the only thing that made sense were to make it in the ant world. And so, and Tom said, "Look, you can. I bought the rights to this book. It's like a children's, picture book. You can do anything you want with it in regards to the story." And so I said, well, tell you what I would do. Even though there's been other ant movies, I look at it like The Incredible Shrinking Man, The Incredible Shrinking Boy, that kind of adventure. It just happens to take place in this world where the ants are. And I said, one of the things that I would look at from our perspective is that playing with scale and bullying, and the idea that we regard ants as nothing because we don't relate to them. If we knew them better, maybe we wouldn't step on them. Just the idea that, hey, in your own backyard, you could have this incredibly complex civilization that exists in your own backyard. And that's what Lucas, the kid, discovers. He's like, oh my God, all this stuff is in my own backyard. These ants are so much more than I ever thought they were. I thought they're just a bunch of stupid ants. But man, they got this really complex, socio-religious system and everything. And so I kind of got off on that. And so my pitch to Tom was that I kind of saw this as like sort of my way to do an homage to Ray Harryhausen, because this boy shrunk down. He's battling giant wasps. He's being eaten by frogs. And I saw these set pieces, and Harryhausen was one of the reasons I got into film, got into animation, definitely. And so I kind of said, well, this could be my sort of way to sort of honor him and sort of have fun, and much the same way my touchstone from Neutron was like some of the Jerry Anderson shows. So my touchstone for Ant Bully was Harryhausen.
Davis knew they needed someone special for the role of Zoc, the wizard ant. And when it comes to wizard ants, there's no one in the world better suited for the role than Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, so Nick was one of my top picks. He was, again, at the time, I loved what he was doing. I loved his indie films particularly, and I thought that here's a guy who could make a character both funny and amusing and also kind of scary at the same time. And one of the touchstones I used was a really early film he did, The Vampire's Kiss, which I've always loved him in that. And he had that sort of, at the same time you look at them and it's a frightening performance from him, but it simultaneously it's really funny. And for the Zoc character, I thought that would be something that character could really use.
I'm so sorry, but I must have the final ingredient for my potion. Now, what's more important? Me completing my life's work for the salvation of the colony, which includes you guys, or your sleep.
Sleep. I'm going with sleep.
And as far as working with him, he was actually one of my favorite people to direct because he approached the job so seriously, which is not always the case. You know, sometimes when celebrities do animation and voice work, they kind of walk in with the attitude of like, okay, what do you want me to read? In fact, I've actually had one say that to me. Like, no, I don't want you to read anything. I want you to act. You got to create a performance. Yeah, this is like, it's filmmaking, no different. In fact, it's even tougher because you're having to do this without virtue of being on the set and in most cases interacting with other artists. So it's a lot of prep and a lot of commitment. And man, Nick brought that. He was like intimately familiar with the script. He was so prepped. And the way he works with the sort of method that he does is that, you know, he before each take, he would be working himself up. He's like, you know, oh yeah, these humans, they've been stomping on our nests for years and flooding our homes, and then he'll turn to the line and he'll, so Lucas, and then he'd go, and then at the end of the take, he would instantly start going direction, because he wanted to move as fast as possible because he could stay in the moment. And so he was very demanding. So I had to like be there right on. And he goes, got it. And then he wouldn't want to wait for slates. And the girl handling the slates was just getting fresh. I said, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out later. He's bringing the stuff, man. So it was a super fast session, but he did so good. I was so happy with him. I just remember that he was like really serious, which is great. I love that, you know, because sometimes they're not so serious about the animation. He was very serious, and he remember eating lunch. He sort of, you know, kept to himself. I think he just wanted to kind of stay in his head, you know, while he's being this character. Yeah, so he was just a man of few words until he got in front of the microphone, and then he would just like cut loose.
Isaac, call upon the elements. The wind that blows, rain that falls, fire that burns. Deliver your awesome power and transform my potion. Klaktil!
You know, we had 250 people working on Ampoli, and we already knew that, oh my gosh, you know, there's going to be a gap for our first time. You know, I mentioned earlier that we always had such good timing where things would overlap and the crew would go from one thing to the other. Well, suddenly we were looking at a point now where, you know what, there's going to be a gap, because even if the sequel happens, even if Seahorse happens, even if these other projects happen that they're wanting us to do, there's still going to be a gap while they're being developed. So we knew we were going to have some layoffs. And so we were telling the crew. And then as we got closer, we knew the layoffs were going to be significant. And we said, look, guys, I know we're under pressure to get this film made. We're in the final throes. We have to. All of our names are going to be on it, you know. And I know you guys are worried about the next gig. But, you know, we're going to try to help that process. And we invited headhunters from, you know, Disney and Pixar and DreamWorks and everybody to come to DNA and interview our crew. And so you guys will have their next gig set up. And so that's what we did. And for several weeks, we'd have representatives from all the studios come out interviewing our crew. And then they would go back and keep working on Ampoli. And so sure enough, when we wound up having to shut down, and by this point, we knew that it's like, you know, we're going to have to shut down just the core group.
From Warner Brothers Pictures.
Whoa!
An ant will sacrifice himself for his friends.
Julia Roberts, Nicolas Cage, Meryl Streep, and Paul Giamatti.
He's come to wipe out the entire colony. We can work together to stop him.
The Ant Bully.
Yeah, so that was Warner Brothers. Yeah, so they had not any real in-house animation at the time, and their track record was not good with handling animation. So I was a little worried about that, and actually some of that did come back to haunt us on the project. Their handling of the distribution was really not good, and they actually called and apologized to me the way it was handled. They kept moving the dates around to where, and it was a very crowded market that year. There was, I think, 4 animated features out simultaneously that summer, and when ours came out, the dates on the poster didn't even match the date of the release. That's how screwed up it was. So then you kind of throw up your hands and go, well, what can I do? You know, it's like, so that didn't help us, but. But what was good is that I had a really good creative working relationship with the execs over there, with Jeff Robinoff and Alan Horn and Courtney Valenti, who I worked with, and I actually really enjoyed working with them. I thought they were great, had really good notes, good ideas. They had a lot of confidence in me, and that really helped and made it a lot more pleasurable for me. But yeah, they were actually great creatively to work with. It's just their marketing distribution part was not so great. It didn't do well. It may have made its money back, but it just got totally lost in the shuffle. And I could feel it because I went on a PA tour a couple of weeks before the release, where I was touring the country doing the talk shows and news things and interviews and stuff. And of course, everybody else is on the same tour for other movies, and we kept crossing paths. And it started to hit me because for every ant bully outdoor board I would see at least 3 Monsters Inc. or I'm not sorry, not Monsters Inc. Monster House or Barnyard or something else. Like there were 2 or 3 times as much. So I'm going, I just don't feel like the film is out there. But by then it's too late, So yeah, they were wanting to build an empire with us. They were so pleased with the way the film was coming. They were throwing all kinds of projects at me. They were throwing live action projects at me. Old McDonald's Farm was going to be like a Blendo with CG characters. There were Neopets was the property they had. They wanted me to do something with. They kept throwing stuff. And then they started talking sequel to Ant Bully. So we were actively pursuing a sequel. We had a concept we were working on. And there was another project called Seahorse that we were developing with Warner Brothers. So they were all into it and really loving what we were doing. But nothing will stall all that progress like a film that doesn't make money. And then when that happened, everything just kind of stopped because they also reevaluated what they did differently, like how come this didn't work? Because Friday, I get the call on the opening day that we're only expecting only this for the weekend. We'll see. They're all kind of down because it's wasn't going to be making a bunch. And I said, well, we'll get the cinema scores, back into it. So we got the cinema scores that following Sunday. And so I got A- cinema score. And I said, that's good, right? And he goes, oh, that's great. I said, but now we can't blame the film. We can just blame ourselves for how we've managed it. And I said, okay. So that makes me feel sort of better, but not really, because it still culminates in the same thing, which is like all these other projects suddenly are just put on the hiatus because, they're trying to figure out what went wrong and how they handle it. I think they're heading for a huge turnover over there until Happy Feet came out. Like Happy Feet came out just maybe 3 months after we did, and it went and did really good for them. And I think that gave them new life and then sort of helped them get back into animation eventually. But yeah, that was really disappointing. After 20 years of just being a workaholic, I said, if we're going to shut down, let's just shut down because I just need a break. and I personally just was like, I was so spent, and all the pressure that I'd been under for so long just all sort of hit me at once. And so I just need to get out from under it for a little while. And my partner, Keith, and I talked and said, well, we're still going to keep DNA. It started off with the 2 of us. It may just end back up with the 2 of us. But now, we don't have to own a huge facility. Our goal was never to own a gigantic facility. Our goal had always been, let's surround ourselves with the tools we need so that we can do our own shorts and own stuff. And so, but now, by this time, there were services everywhere. You could go and outsource animation, and back when we did Neutron, they didn't exist. We had to create our own. But now we don't really have to have this sort of money pit, So let's just focus on being a smaller company that's going to be just handling the creative part, And so we went down that road and shut down. We still have the company. Now it's just back to Keith and I again. And really, it's kind of a yours, mine, ours thing, because I've got my own projects that, things I'm doing now, and Keith has his own projects, and then we have things that we do together. So yeah, we're just back to being small little company again. Yeah, well, it's funny how you've got these there's moments in life, and this has happened to me before. It's almost like guardian angels, like people, random strangers out of nowhere, tell you exactly the kind of things you need to hear when you need to hear it. And I had one of those moments. I was flying back from LA, and I was really down and upset because I hated to shut the company down and lay off people. Some of these people work with the company for 10 years, and these are friends, and they've got families, and it's heartbreaking. It's tough. And on the plane, and I was sitting next to this guy, and it turned out this guy was some high muckety muck business guy, and we started talking, and he said, no. I said, listen, you have to be really careful. I mean, you're going through. I've seen it before. I've done it before. But you can't get too emotional. You have to be realistic, because if you start going in and trying to, prop everything up, personally, you're going to get yourself personal upside down, and you're going to wind up with nothing. The best thing to do is just you got to get small, go through that, figure out what you want to do, but don't let it destroy you. Don't let it get upside down. And it's like those are the kind of things that I kind of needed to hear just for my own, self-preservation, if you will. So it's just that kind of thing. It was such a, Keith and I've talked about this a bunch, and I think that everything kind of has a shelf life, and for what we did and the way that we did it and how we did it, I think that was our shelf life. We had this huge 20-year plus arc to get to that point, and then it was like, either to keep going, we would have to sell out to somebody, bring in investors, in which case Keith and I wouldn't own the company anymore. And we would kind of work for them, and that would be contracted for a few years. Then we can go off and do our own thing. Or we can just go off and do our own thing now. And so that was kind of where I fell on the ladder.